So, what's up, Facebook? This is Devon Carter from CarTek Consulting. You can follow me at CarTek Consult on Twitter. My website is www.cartekconsulting.com. That's CARTEK consulting.com. CarTek stands for Carter Technologies, and we are a cybersecurity consulting firm. Cybersecurity is what we do, that is our focus as a business. So, the purpose of this talk today is I wanted to kind of give a review or a follow-up of the Equifax breach that happened maybe a year or two ago, something like that, maybe a year ago. And the reason why this is important right now is because they just released like the postmortem, so to speak, the report on exactly what happened and how the breach occurred. And we kind of knew at a high level what was going on with the breach because it's the same way they get most big companies. It's a familiar pattern, so to speak. But I just want to take a few minutes today to kind of talk about that and kind of process exactly what happened with it. So just to give you a quick recap, Equifax got hacked a little over a year ago, or whatever that timeline was, and they stole some like millions upon millions of financial records of Americans. Now, why is it important to us? Because these are our financial records. As Equifax is one of the credit bureaus, so every time we try to get credit, every time we try to get a loan, every time we try to do anything that requires credit or a background check, typically they're gonna hit Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. So Equifax that breach was a really, really big deal when you consider the potential long-term impact of that breach. So in reading the report, I found a couple of interesting things, right? Because a lot of people seem to have the opinion that there's these bunch of super geniuses sitting in a basement somewhere coding, and they got the screen up like the Matrix, just kind of going at it. And that's not really the case. In the case of Equifax, and actually, I want to see if I can share. Um, I don't think it's gonna let me share my screen right now. No, it's not gonna let me share my screen. So I just kind of talk through it. So basically, what the attackers did, the way they got access to everything is they ran scans on the internet, continuous scans on the internet for specific vulnerabilities. Now, vulnerability is basically a weakness in your system. It could be in the software application or web application, whatever you have running on your computer. Maybe you didn't patch it like you were supposed to, and so because that machine is unpatched, it's vulnerable to a certain type of attack. So that's what the attackers did in this case. They went out and they were just scanning the internet for different servers that were vulnerable to a very specific type of vulnerability, right? So they came upon the Equifax servers. Okay, now the Equifax server that was actually breached, it was their dispute resolution portal. So anytime you had a dispute or anything like that about your credit and all that stuff, you would go to this portal on this website on this server, and it would kind of, you would have to fill out the paperwork and so on and so forth. Well, the vulnerability was in that server. All right. Now, the I don't want to say the cool thing because I don't want to give them credit, but cybersecurity is what I do. What they did from there is they went in, logged in, got access to the system through the vulnerability, and then they just kind of looked around and figured out, okay, how can I get access again? They figured out what was connected to the server and so on and so forth. So what they did was they went from maybe one or 10 servers that they initially breached, and they expanded that to like 48 servers, right? So they expanded it because they found 48 other servers with that same vulnerability. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, why didn't anybody detect this vulnerability? That's a great question. The thing is that they did detect the vulnerability. They were actually informed of the vulnerability. Equifax actually sent out emails to all the server administrators in the company that said, hey, go ahead and patch your systems because this vulnerability exists and it can lead to something real bad happening. The problem is that their email list was incomplete. So everybody that managed a server or that was in charge of servers and things like that didn't get the communication, so they didn't patch their servers. That's why they were still vulnerable. So right there, you got miscommunication in the team within a corporation of that size. And And that's not hard, but it just seems kind of a little ridiculous that something as simple as a bad contact list potentially was the start of a hack this large and had this much far-reaching impact. So anyway, so from there they escalated and increased the number of servers that they had that they actually got access to. The attackers then they then kind of, let me see, they started testing credentials in the background. So once they got into the system, they started looking for ways to gain access to credentials and then testing those credentials in the background on a whole bunch of different systems. The attackers were able to remain hidden all this time. Nobody knew what was going on. In fact, the attackers were able to post 9,000 queries against the databases in the background. So what does that mean? So when you go to Amazon and stuff like that, you hitting web servers at the front end. So all the pretty pictures and everything, they're sitting on web servers. Well, the actual information or the cost of all the things you want to buy on Amazon, that information sits on databases in the background. So this is what the attackers ended up getting access to in Equifax. They got access to the databases in the background, and they ran a bunch of queries on it. So a query is basically a question. They went in and said, hey, we're going to ask all these questions that we can to these servers, all these queries to these servers, and we're going to see what kind of responses we get back. Now, it was crazy because they actually ran 9,000 queries against these servers without being detected. 9,000 queries. Now, that may not be a lot, but it should have been noticed at some level because it should have been an anomaly, some anomalous type activity that somebody should have picked up and somebody should have recognized. Well, once they gained access to all these databases, okay, once they figured out how they were going to do it, what they wanted to do, that's when they started trying to exfiltrate the data. So exfiltrate meaning trying to get all the data out that they have found, right? Because they went in, they got the vulnerabilities, or they went in through the vulnerable systems. They got access to all the data they needed in the background. So then they need to figure out how to pull that data out. And they did that. They were pulling data out for 76 days before anybody noticed. 76 days, 2.5 months, right? Before anybody noticed. The reason they didn't notice, they said, is because, or I'm sorry, they said they found it because of a routine check that they did. Now, I take a little issue with that if you think about it. Is it really a routine check if you only do it every 76 days? That ain't really routine to me. But I digress. I'm not gonna go there with that. So anyway, they were exfiltrating data for 76 days before anybody really picked up and figured out what was going on, right? Well, at that point, by the time you found it, it's too late. They had already pulled out so much data, which was in the form of our data, consumers, right? All of our credit data, our background data, all the stuff that we hold so near and dear to our hearts that, is a key to our being able to get credit in the future. So when you think about it from that aspect, this is not just a big data breach or it's not just a big corporate issue. It's a consumer issue. It's a you and me issue that we should be really, really thinking about for the long term. We need to be careful of, and you really can't get around giving your data to Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian because they're the credit bureaus. But on the other side of the house, there's other websites that we just freely give our information away to. Now, if somebody like Equifax can make a simple mistake like this that can lead to a breach as large as this, other big corporations are vulnerable to it as well. And that's why you keep seeing these big breaches and these big hacks coming out every so often, because people are not taking care of the basic things. So a few weeks ago, I gave my first talk here on Facebook Live, where I was kind of trying to explain to people the importance of doing the basics, updates, changing your passwords regularly. Those two things will help protect you a lot. Antivirus systems, making sure you have good antivirus installed on your machines, making sure that stuff stays updated, right? When you notice something weird happening on your computer, it seems to be going cutting off every now and again, or seems to be acting a little funky, so to speak. Take note of that stuff. Recognize it. Even if you just got to write it down. All right. Run an antivirus check right then. See if you know anything else. If you like me, change your passwords if you think something's going on. All that stuff is important to ensure that your data is secure, because ultimately there was a time where people were always concerned about, oh, I don't want my computer to get stolen. Well, now who cares about the hardware? It's the data. Okay, and that leads us to backup. Something else I talked about a while ago. Everybody should have some form of backup. Okay, you can go to, you know, Dropbox. What's it? Carbonite. I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, a bunch of sites out there. You can get a local one at your house, a little local NAS storage unit at your house for less than $100. Back your stuff up. What does that do? Well, and hopefully it will protect you in the event that you have a breach, you get hacked, and someone tries to destroy your computer, ransomware, all these different types of things. Well, now you have backed up data somewhere. So now you don't have to worry about it. Wipe the computer, start off from scratch, you got your data, and you should be good to go. So a lot of this stuff, just like with the Equifax breach, it started from something as simple as not updating, not patching the servers, that led to one of the most well-known breaches in recent history, right? So the same thing applies for us. When you talk about small businesses are becoming more and more vulnerable to this stuff, because guess what? They are not prepared. Why are they not prepared? Because they're not taking care of the basics, the stuff that doesn't even cost a lot of money. Okay, so what you do, patch your systems, back them up, change your passwords, be vigilant in what you're doing. Make sure you're checking behind your workers, okay, verifying that they're not accessing things that they shouldn't be accessing. All that stuff plays a part in ensuring that you're secure for the long term when it comes to your company, your personal business, or the large corporation you work for. Hold on one second. So one of the other things that I want to kind of mention to you is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So what happened with this thing was, it was twofold. It wasn't just the actual hack. It was now with, not trying to get political, but now with some of the new administration or administrative direction for the current administration, the protections that we had in place are now getting rolled back, and that is really starting to impact us from a consumer level. So I think I pulled this from a story on CNET, ZNet, one of those websites, and it said the full-scale probe of Equifax in February 2018, May 2018, the Federal Trade Commission named former Equifax lawyer as the head of its Consumer Protection Office that was tasked with investigating Equifax in the first place. A bill introduced to sanction companies like Equifax in case of appalling breaches slowly died out, while another bill that would reward Equifax despite privacy breaches was introduced a few months later. So think about what just happened there. You had a large corporation that got just owned by some attackers, where all of our personal data was taken and used for whatever nefarious activities they got, probably available on the dark net or whatever. The guy who was in charge, one of the guys that was in charge at Equifax, is now running the Consumer Protection Bureau. That makes no sense. He obviously didn't get it right the first time. So the answer to that is to give him more. Okay. And then when we had something that would allow us to hold companies responsible for when they lose our data, that bill dies out. And now a new bill surfaces that is going to reward a company that has such egregious breaches that just didn't make sense, that cost a lot of people a lot of data and potentially a lot of money if their identities end up getting stolen. So there's a lot going on in the cybersecurity field and the IT field that we need to take into account. I'm sorry, my little man walked in. So take into account a lot of things here. So I'm gonna get ready to get off this phone. This is my cue. Get off this this video. I just want to go ahead and say, please stay secure out there. Please make good decisions when it comes to your security, and let's all just be secure. This is Devon Carter from CarTek Consulting, and I'm signing off. Y'all have a good night.